Hi, I'm Doug Mackenzie, and welcome back to another episode of the Regtech Show. On this episode, we look at PSD2, GDPR, and the effects that these regulations will have in regards to collaboration. First up, I speak with Bank of Ireland's Julie Connor about the changes and opportunities currently facing the financial industry. Lea Jakobiak also sits down with Asignio's Carl Rutherford to take a look at their approach to safe access management.
So I think the financial industry is going through an interesting phase at the moment. I think it depends on what kind of a company you are, whether you're an incumbent or a new challenger bank. I think for incumbents, let's say the traditional banking sector, there are certain sort of legacy issues that they're carrying in terms of probably last century type of systems, IT, versus let's say the newer banks have the opportunity to be perhaps fully digital, to be maybe just mobile apps. So it's a fundamentally different perspective in terms of what's happening in the industry. I think also there's a convergence, let's say, in terms of digital, in terms of what's available in tech. It's driving a very interesting innovation, pace of change, value services being offered to customers. It's happening in a technical space, whereas traditional banking wouldn't be viewed as trendsetters when it comes to digital and tech. So I think that's both the challenge and the opportunity. And I think then it's just in terms of how do incumbents choose to actually play in that sector. Do we partner? Do we collaborate? Is there something then that we need to change within our existing business models to be able to compete effectively?
Well, we're a mobile authentication company that's based on handwriting recognition. So we authenticate the user by having them sign on their phone. They can sign their initials or draw little pictures or whatever they want to do. As long as it's repeatable, that's how we identify who the user is.
And can you show me on your phone how
Sure.
it works?
Yeah, it's very simple. So I sign in on my phone by pressing this, and then my signature is just very simple, my initials.
Okay.
And we measure how fast, peak acceleration curves, and all sorts of different parameters on that signature to make sure that it's actually you doing it.
And of course, big question, it's super safe.
Very safe. It's our false acceptance rates are in excess of 50 times what Touch ID is.
Okay.
So
it's not like faking your parents'
it's very,
ID.
very difficult to do that. Yes, because you may have the shape right, but
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have the speed.
Next up, Ali Patterson caught up with Nationwide's Graham Edwards to talk about GDPR, addressing some of the challenges and changes that this regulation has brought with it.
GDPR is one of the things that is really a challenge. It's a challenge for us, but I think it's a challenge for almost every bank, every financial institution to try and step up to. It probably shouldn't be as big an issue as it is. A lot of the rights that have been put into GDPR existed beforehand, but they've been stepped up, and the detail that's required is much more intense, and therefore it's quite a challenge. And we've got a lot of legacy systems, as most banks and financial institutions have, and those legacy systems don't lend themselves to immediately be turned into something that complies. The issues that have come about, which are raised in GDPR, for instance, is not keeping data more than you need it to. So you only keep it where necessary and for appropriate purposes. And so actually that weeding down of the data is required, and quite a difficult thing to do, to keep on top of it, to make sure that it's done appropriately. So for Nationwide, we see all this legislation as being exactly the right stuff for our customers. All the rights that GDPR brings in are what we'd expect to give our members anyway. You know, not all our customers are members, but most of them are members, and as members, they own us. They would expect us to do the right thing. There is nothing in GDPR that we don't see as being fundamentally the right thing to do. So why wouldn't we do it? If you think about it, it's all that GDPR says is that, hey, we'll only use the data for what we say we'll use it for, and we'll be open and transparent and tell you what we're going to use it for. And we'll maintain its accuracy. We'll only store accurate things about you. Again, that's all GDPR expects that, as the Data Protection Act did before, actually, if we're honest. And it says, well, actually, you're entitled to erase the data if you want to. There are all kinds of issues with the financial industry on that, because we have other laws that say we have to, for financial crime purposes, maintain records for so many years after the termination of a relationship. So we have to be, we have to balance those things and get the various laws in the right hierarchy, but the personal rights of individuals are quite high up there. And then if we look at the other rights, they have the right to be not subject to automated decision making. People have the choice. And with many of these things, it's all about the choice. But those choices already existed. So in most of our systems, there was a right of appeal. So we do things like credit scoring. Obviously, that's semi-automated or fully automated nowadays. But people have the right to ask for a manual review, which is what GDPR enshrines, and so on. So all the stuff that's in there is actually just what's good for the customer anyway. You know, why wouldn't we do it?
We wanted to find out more about PSD2 and the impact that it's actually had on the financial industry. So we spoke with Bank of Ireland to find out more about the regulation and their approach in handling it.
Well, as we know, I suppose PSD2 is regulation that had to be translated into each national member state in the European Union. And the purpose of it was to drive harmonisation throughout the EU in terms of how we achieve delivering, I suppose, digital services in an emerging digital market throughout Europe. So in terms of how it facilitates open banking, it's facilitated the banks opening up access to these new service providers that are coming into the market. It's also created a level playing field where these new service providers have to operate now in a regulated environment, have to become accustomed to some of the standards, regulation, scrutiny that banks already adhere to in this space. So I think with respect to Catalyst, it's the starting point, it's only the stepping stone. And I think we probably need this in terms of trying to bring everybody to a place, but I think where open banking will go to in the next 3 to 5 years is somewhere very different to what it will be as a result of PSD2.
So can you tell me what's Bank of Ireland's approach to PSD2 then?
Okay, so in terms of our approach to PSD2, as you're aware, there were a couple of deadlines within PSD2. The first one that took place in January 2018 was more or less an update of the original PSD that came out in 2009. So as a group, Bank of Ireland operates in both the UK and in Ireland. So we take a centralised approach to how we implement, we say regulatory change. So we would have had a central programme that would have analysed and looked at PSD to see what was required from a compliance perspective. And then we would actually work with all impacted business units throughout the group. Our retail colleagues being significantly impacted with respect to, let's say, our customers obviously are front and foremost in terms of the impacts of this legislation. So all these impacted business units are brought through, let's say, what's required to be compliant with PSD2, and then we continue to work with them to make sure that what they do to achieve compliance is consistent with other units throughout the group. And I suppose when it's a piece of regulation and we've got regulators as well as you've got governments both in Ireland and the UK, there's various bodies who have, I suppose, responsibility either from a regulatory or legislative nature. There are many aspects that have to be considered in terms of what has to be rolled out. So while we may have a single set of requirements that has to be implemented, as ever, however many witnesses are at an accident, there's a different view of interpreting than what's required to meet those requirements. So that's, I suppose, the initial phase of PSD in terms of the regulatory, the compliance aspect. We also have our second deadline, which is this open banking deadline in 2019, September 2019.
Finally, we sit down with RBS's Wincy Wong to explore whether or not PSD2 has actually made it easier for them to collaborate. We also look at how the regulation has allowed companies to use customer data to get to know their clients better.
I think the spirit of the regulation is in the right place. It is about how do we help our customers? How do we allow them to actually own and see their own data, manipulate it, and be able to use it for other experiences to help them manage their finances better, have a better picture, and have more choice. And I think that's a really powerful thing. So what that's done is that it's, as a side almost to that, it's waking up the bank, at least our bank, to the possibilities of an API future, which is exactly where all the technology companies are going. And actually, in order for a large corporation nowadays, not just banks, but any large corporation to survive, it needs to be more innovative and it needs to be up with all the trends. And building an API-based platform is absolutely the right thing to do.
I think to me, the real benefit, or the true benefit of PSD and open banking, is the ability to know our customers better and the ability to understand their financial lifestyle. And I think that's probably what's more interesting. It's the data. It's not just that they make payments. It's actually what's going on in their life. And I think open banking offers the ability to be where your customer is in terms of their lifestyle, whether they're shopping online and looking to buy furniture, or maybe it's a big time purchase, so maybe you look to offer them a real-time loan or a credit based on the fact that you know their capability, you know their circumstances, you understand that they're going to have the mortgage coming out later in the month. I suppose it's the ability to leverage data and to be a true sort of digital financial friend to customers.
The data security is constantly changing. So the threats against us are evolving continuously. They get tougher and tougher. I've been doing security now for very many years, and every few years you have to reinvent your whole self to look at the new threats that are out there. So the efforts that we put in now is one of continually playing catch up with what the threats are that are out there, but actually we put much more emphasis now onto being proactive. So we use intelligence sources to work out what's coming up so that we can proactively put stuff in place before it actually comes to fruition. Playing catch up is a very dangerous game. It's asymmetric warfare we're engaged in here. The bad guys can spend a lot of money, and we can have fixed budgets to contain that, and therefore if we just wait for something to happen, we're already too late. So we have to be on the front foot.
I believe, we have a good relationship with our customers. Our customers want us to be safe. They want to know that what they do with us is secure. So maybe if they go through a few extra steps in terms of ensuring that their information is secure, they're prepared to do that because they feel assured, that they know, oh, the bank knows me and I'm doing this because then that means the fraudster next door won't be able to do it.
Handwriting has unique characteristics to use, so we use math algorithms on it, and it evolved over the last 3 or 4 years. And I can do it on anything with a touch screen, which makes it very flexible. The user experience has to be something that they can, it's repeatable. They're in control, it's secure, but it's also comfortable. I don't necessarily want to do a selfie when I'm in the grocery store line or some of those other places, or talking while I'm in the train station is not necessarily easy to overcome. So this is actually something that's quite private, and that we think that's valuable for the consumer. It's a single sign-on for multiple things. So if you want to sign on to your bank account or for step-up authentication to approve a high-value transaction, it works for that. But it also could work for, it's a simple plug-in into a web page, so it could work for how do I access my healthcare, how do I access my even my home or my office VPN system or whatever it needs to be done. There's all sorts of use cases that we find having a very simple plug-in in the web system works well for that. I unlock my phone with my fingerprint, and that's really good. But
then you use this
then I use that to we call it step up or do something where it's that next layer. If I'm going to unlock my phone 80 times a day or whatever the average is, it's some crazy number like that. That probably means that it's not necessarily, doing it twice isn't going to improve the security on that transaction.
Sure.
You just, if it's ever been compromised, doing it twice is compromised twice, so to speak. So we like to have a second, it's 2 keys in the door is safer than having just 1 key in your door.
Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us on the next episode of the Regtech Show.